So, this is kind of the opportunity, if you will, especially at 1400 gold, where it's one of those things where the gold price is kind of still ahead. And again, this is all speculation, and it depends on how one does their own valuations. But, it's arguable that the gold price is ahead of a lot of these juniors. You just kind of have to know where to look, or, try to find that needle in the haystack.
Yeah, I mean, just based on sentiment levels or lack of interest in the juniors, so you could probably buy whatever junior, basically, and just wait it out and have a fairly good return, just based on the greater fools. But I mean, at the same time, as you said, the sentiment can make things so inefficient. I mean, one of my absolutely favorite picks is, of course, Novo Resources, for example. They put out like 8 or 9 now news releases in 2 months, and the stock hasn't really moved at all. So that just makes you wonder, okay, does it mean, or is the market totally efficient and 9 news releases are basically irrelevant? Or is this just a lack of new buyers? And I mean, because I know there are a lot of big bulls who already got a very large percentage of their portfolio in Novo. They can't basically buy much more. So okay, you won't get any help from the already in place bulls. So you need to have others waking up to it. But there's no reason for others to wake up for it, because the share price isn't telling them anything. Because, I mean, let's face it, most people look at the share price as some comforting thing. That, okay, it goes up, it must mean that it's good. But, I mean, if you're a value investor, basically what you will be doing a lot of times is catch falling knives. And increasingly catch falling knives that falls even farther. I mean, that's just how it goes. If you have a view of what the inherent or intrinsic value proposition is for a company, based on, all the future possible scenarios you can think of, and then attach probabilities and whatnot, and then derive some kind of expected value or net present value. When the market values the company under that number, you should be buying. And if it goes down even further, you should be buying. But that's not how it works most of the time. And I've been buying Novo heavily the last 2-3 weeks, something like that. And while I guess a lot of people have been panicking, and I'm frustrated, that I get, I'm very frustrated, because the market is, in my opinion, totally clueless. They could put out almost any news release. It won't even matter, because sentiment is so poor, and it doesn't create an excitement. But as we saw in 2017, when it gets going, or that goes for basically any story, when it gets going, it just starts feeding on itself. So I want to be ahead of that, and I just think it's I think people miss the point when they ridicule value investors for buying in a downtrend or whatever. I get it. Nobody wants to have a stock that's going down. That's not the point. But if I think that, let's say, a company should be worth 3 times more in 2 years based on the current gold price. If you just look at what that makes out in a percentage gain per year, that's a very good return and should be beating GDXJ or whatever at current gold prices. But the market is totally impatient, and I'm impatient. Yeah, it's just hard to, just look at the facts and take a step back and try to be as rational as you can, and realize that just because the market doesn't care doesn't mean that the news doesn't change the underlying value or long-term value of the company. Basically, your job as a value investor is to take advantage of such times, not really see it as a bad thing, because in that case you don't really have the right conviction, I would say, because although it's frustrating, I don't get easily panicked when it comes to, for example, Novo, because I think its time will come again, and it's a totally different company than it was 1 year or 2 years ago, for that matter. And yet the market and the pundits treat Novo like nothing has changed. That they have one project, which is very negative. That's what I see being repeated all the time. It's like, okay, wake up. They've got 3 projects. They're staking even more land. Sumitomo is in, which is a $25 billion company, and they only do deals with like Newmonts and Techs. I mean, what does that tell you? Do you think they're just having a laugh and we'll gamble some more? I mean, as far as I understand it, the Japanese are often slow movers, so I mean, they must have a pretty good conviction to be doing what they are doing, and I don't think they would be happy with anything less than a venture that will be worth in the probably billions of dollars of value. But again, at these prices or at this level in Novo, I mean, the deal gets ridiculed, and longs get ridiculed because the market isn't agreeing with them. It's like, okay, it's a low liquidity market. Anyone can move the stock. So I just think it's overall across the board a good time to pick the quality juniors, and as we talked about, pick the one that seem to have a bright future ahead of themselves and have, I mean, fallback plans or pipeline of projects, and not just bet on some low-grade, high capex play, and you just have to cross your fingers that you won't be diluted down to nothing before a greater fool comes along and starts buying it.
I think Novo is actually probably one of the great case studies in mining stocks right now, because you mentioned, there's more than meets the eyes. The company's working on a lot of projects, and, to be able to bring in a reputable company like Sumitomo just recently with that, what was it, like a $30 million investment for just one of the projects?
30 US, 42 Australian.
Right, and that's just for Egina alone, right? It's not for any of the other projects.
That was for 7% of Novo's total land holdings, which is even less now if they execute on the option with the Grey, which the Grey option is even bigger than the Egina project. So I mean, it's like, let's say 5% or even less of let's say 7%, just to be a bit conservative. Okay, they're earning in 40% of 7% of the land holdings, and the implied value, and of course, since it's so early stage, I mean, the implied value is 100 million now, Australian, but I don't think they are interested in a net present value of 100 million, because they only get 40% of it. I mean, all the major deals with like Luminex, for example, their options with Freeport and Anglo American, they're for like 50 million for 60%, and they're obviously not looking for something with an implied value of 100 million. They're hoping they will find something, a copper porphyry that's worth $1 billion or something like that. So I mean, it really blows my mind. That's like you can look at the share price and then conclude that, okay, this is meaningless because nobody bought on the news release or haven't bought any of the news releases. I mean, I think the money on the table is just piling up, and that's why I'm so greedy at the moment. I mean, I could be wrong, of course, but I mean, from my point of view, the story's just gotten better and better, and we get more validation and less risk now with Sumitomo funding Egina for the coming like 3 years, and Novo can advance their other projects. So I think it will just, I mean, that will stack up someday. I mean, as they say, or as Buffett says, it's the market is a voting machine in the short term and a weighing machine in the long term, and there is nobody that can tell me that for some reason the value of the implied value of all future scenarios for Novo didn't increase with a deal like that with such a large company as Sumitomo, and who might be coming into Beaton's Creek or Commonwealth, for example. I mean, that's like Novo having basically a private bank to become the thing that I think Sumitomo thinks it can become. So I mean, it's to me totally bonkers, and I of course get ridiculed because the share price isn't doing well. But I mean, hey, sure, why not? I've just been loading up more. I like when Silver Standard crashed, when Novo went under $2, I started buying heavily.
This is just the nature of the beast, Erik. I don't think it has to be, personal or anything like that. There's actually so many examples of this, but I think Novo's a really great case study most recently because, back in 2017 when all the hype kind of ensued, you had Kirkland Lake that kind of stepped up to the plate and, they took a stake, and now you have Sumitomo, like you're mentioning. There's multiple projects, fundamentals are getting better, but as you know, with the whole life cycle of a junior minor curve. Not only that, but just investor psychology in general. When a story's fresh and it's new, that's when you have these super Nova blow off tops where, first the company can do no wrong. A stock gets really ahead of itself when, for example, when Novo did the live demonstration with the jackhammers and the nuggets and all that.
Yeah.
It blew past $1 billion market valuation, the stock's all-time high. So it did the hyperbolic move already. But once it comes crashing down, what actually happens with these stories is now you have a lot of bag holders that were buying near the top. And like you mentioned, this is a particular sector. There's not really that much retail interest anyway. So for all the people that were early on and who have taken the most, fancy to this exploration story, they've probably already piled in and they've probably bought their full allocation and then some, because it's been a many month kind of decline stagnation phase. So, it's just, again, the nature of the beast. And what you're saying is once all the money that, is interested in the stock has already bought in, who's left to actually, boost the stock and actually purchase shares on the market now? There's really not that much.
No, as you say, there's just potential sellers left then. Yeah. Until there comes some new buyers or one of the bigger bulls wins on a lottery ticket or something. But I mean, like in 2017 when it ran up, I mean, that was pricing in future. I mean, based on one trench video basically, and then Kirkland stake, that started to price in a lot, just based on one trench that's been opened at that point in time anyway. So that's very, curious because like now, the present isn't even factored in, or what the present suggests about the future. So, it went from one extreme to another.
Right.
And that's just how it goes. And at this point, I think the risks are exaggerated and the future potential is underestimated. And back in 2017, the risks were underestimated, and perhaps it's also easy to say in hindsight what was rational. For example, nobody knew if there was fine gold, for example. So you can't look at that, be like outcome dependent and say, I was a bear and I knew it because the share price is crashing because there weren't any fine gold, so they can't drill it. Nobody knew that. That just happened to be the outcome. So when people pat themselves on the backs for being right about let's say the direction of a stock based on their own bias or whatever. If it was a good buy or sell decision at a point in time, the outcome doesn't say much about the actual decision. It's like buying an exploration stock. Most of them will crash. There's like 1 in 50 that will find something interesting. But that doesn't mean that everyone that misses was a bad investment or speculation, or every company that hits something was good speculation. The odds are unknowable. So the only thing you can control is what you basically buy in. I mean, the price you buy in. Okay, what am I paying for this speculation? And there's always going to be a bunch of bears that look correct because they are bearish a certain expiration stock, and then they miss, which they are supposed to do, if you know what I mean, and then they come out and say, yeah, I called it, I knew it. That I mean, that's not skills at all. I mean, I could literally go into 50 companies today, visit their forums who are, grassroots exploring, and say, oh, they won't find anything. Then come back like a year later and be proven right, quotation marks, in 49 of 50 cases. That doesn't mean I'm a genius. That's just the way the odds work in this business.
With Novo, it's a lot of it with these stories, you can be right, but if your timing is wrong, then the consequences are just as bad, if not more devastating, because, timing these things is never easy. That's kind of why, for myself personally, I just don't like to chase hype FOMO stories, especially when they're brand new, because, the sky's the limit the first time around. You don't know how far valuations will get stretched. It's running on hype alone. And, even if it eventually materializes to something tangible and real and it can generate cash flow and all that good stuff, early on, it's just way too soon to presume all these things, and you're really using it as an opportunity to offload to the greater fool, right? And then once you have all these bag holders, the stock crashes. Even if fundamentals, rapidly improve, even seemingly overnight, it's just you have so much more resistance to overcome because of all these bag holders, right? But with Novo, I'm not gonna presume to know where the future is gonna end up for the story, but if there is some solace, we talked about this earlier offline, I'm just gonna bring it up again. Back in 2011, there's a Twitter tweet that I'm just gonna post right here where it says, from a guy, I wish I had kept my 1700 BTC at 0.06 instead of selling them at 0.30 now that they're $8, right? So that's $8 Bitcoin in 2011, and now we're sitting at about $12,000 per Bitcoin, which is so far-fetched, and you can't even fathom or grasp that. Not to say that Novo is going to be on the same trajectory, but even the stuff that ultimately materializes into something beyond your wildest dreams, it's never a smooth sailing ride to get there. There's always going to be a roller coaster up and down. There's always going to be those moments where you feel shaken and you really just want to cash out because it just seems like the sky's falling and there's no hope, and there's nothing that's ever going to reignite the story. But kind of as Bitcoin showed, and I know that's kind of off topic, it's not really related to mining, but it's still the nature of speculation and human psychology.
Just to tag on to that, as you said, take Bitcoin for example, which had a multi-year quiet period basically. So like that guy in his tweet, he couldn't stand it any longer and sold out at whatever because it wasn't moving enough or something like that. So in hindsight, obviously the absolutely best decision would be to double down at every low, because it would come back and with a vengeance and went from whatever that guy sold, like 6 cents, 30 cents, and reached 12,000. So that's not, I'm not trying to compare that to Novo. It's just that in hindsight, everything is knowable, and our job as a value investor is to try to gauge what we think something might be worth. And that will, of course, not play out tomorrow. Every time I buy something that I think is cheap, often it has gone down already, and it keeps going down. Because, when I think something is cheap, that means often that the bearish extreme isn't hit yet. Because a lot of things go beyond cheap, and quite, some ways sometime beyond cheap. So, I'm just trying to, like I've done with Novo, I have more shares during what I see as sentiment extremes, and especially, like for example now, when Novo has come so far in like the last year, and Sumitomo just validated Quinton's and Novo's belief on the Egina project. That was like a month ago or something, and I still see people saying that okay, people were bamboozled by the trench video or whatever. I mean, first of all, that wasn't a bamboozle. They just showed what's there. I mean, it's up to everyone to make up their own opinion, and you can't really fault anyone for what effect something would have if it's just showing the truth. I mean, I didn't understand why it went up so much on just a trench video, because to me that's just a snapshot. But I was already long because I believed in the overall thesis of there being a potentially very large gold deposit or deposits in the Pilbara. And I basically just tried to, have the fundamentals improved? Yes, I would say so. And what has the price done? Oh, okay, it's gone down. Okay, what should you do? I mean, not that I know what the outcome will be. It's just that my expectation is that all these developments will be worth more in the eyes of the market in time, and when it's totally out of sync, I just load up. And so far, like I did in 2015 and 16, that has worked out well. But the main thing is to, leave yourself room to double down if there is a good idea, not to go like all in ASAP, because if you, as I said, find something that's cheap, nothing says that it won't get cheaper. And if you can buy something that is cheap, that you will probably make money on, good money, within 1 or 2, 3, 4 years, and you can buy even more at lower prices and up your share count, like let's say 100%. That would be a great investment in the end, even though you started buying, I wouldn't say too high, but higher than it bottomed out at. So I'm just playing that it will be a weighing machine down the line, and we all know that success stories like Kirkland Lake, for example, they can keep the market honest because their success quickly has come down to the bottom line. They are making a huge amount of cash. They have high margins, and everyone can read a cash flow statement. So that's the easiest and most thankful thing in the world for, and that's why there are studies out there who show that if you buy a developer in the boring phase, there is alpha to be had to hold it up until production, because that's when the market will, first of all, other investors will come in, and the cash flow will keep the market honest. And while at the in the bottom of the Lassonde curve, there's no excitement, except for the ones that, okay, yeah, sure, I'll wait 1 year for probably a 50% upside or whatever. It's just shuffling money from the impatient to the patient, and that's how it's always going to be. And with Novo, for example, everyone expects it to be boring, and honestly, since the sentiment is rubbing off, with 9 news releases having no effect, I have no idea what news release will have effect, but I take that as a contrarian sign that I don't think it can get any more boring in the eyes of the market, because if Sumitomo can't really make the stock move and stuff like that, then I just know that, okay, if we are at the bottom levels of interest, there's only one way to go from here, regardless of the actual outcomes, but just based on a sentiment level that, okay, yeah, since I don't know what could spark in the interest, I guess that means that even though I'm a huge bull, it says something about just how depressing sentiment is.
So Erik, with all that said, what insights do you want to drop to listeners?
Well, first of all, do your own due diligence. It's like, I think I wrote about it some time ago, that, okay, sure, it sucked that 2016 was a false breakout, but in all honesty, I think that was a blessing, because I've had the time to read up as much as I can about mining and gold mining and value a mining company, for example. So I mean, I got 2 years of just making myself a better investor, and I mean, I think I've changed tremendously over time, and I can't overstate the importance of conviction, because every time I buy, every time I take even a 1% stake in a company that I've just briefly looked at and looks rather cheap on surface, and it sounds exciting, whatever. If that starts to fall, I immediately think, oh, I've done the wrong decision, or whatever. I shouldn't be in this stock, and I sometimes I can hold a stock for like a few days. Most of the time that's a small position, but it's just I feel like I'm taking huge risks when I have a 1% position in a company that I have okay conviction in, but not really great conviction in contrast to, let's say, a company like Novo, where I've been anything from 25 to 100% all in. I mean, I sleep better having that kind of position in a stock that I think I understand, and I think I know what the value is, and why I won't wake up tomorrow to a negative surprise. Then when I, let's say, take a insy-winsy position in a company that I don't really fully understand. I mean, I get feedback ASAP from that kind of investing, because anytime it goes down, I'm starting not panicking, but I just think I made a bad decision. And when you start to change your case for a company just because it goes down for 1 or 2 days, that means that you don't understand the company at all, in my opinion.
All right. And finally, in conclusion, Erik, is this gold bull market for real, or is there going to be more pain ahead?
That's a good question. I think it's for real. It seems that the wheels are coming off in corners all around the world, and okay, sure, a lot of places are going to lower their rates to stimulate and whatnot. And I know there's a bunch of 10-year rates in different countries that have gone to sub-zero for the first time ever. I just think that the jig is up, that even the broader market is like, okay, yeah, this is the end game. This will be the last, because if and when this doesn't work, there's no other way than inflation, either through, it just comes naturally, or countries will start devalue. I think it's for real.
All right, Erik, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Ye.